Right now, while most attention in low Earth orbit still goes to the International Space Station, another orbital platform is quietly changing how people think about life in space. China's Tiangong space station is smaller, newer, and far less familiar to many viewers outside the space community. But that is exactly why it deserves a closer look. Because the real story here is not simply that Tiangong exists. It is that China has built a station that appears to reflect a very different engineering philosophy, one shaped by newer systems, tighter integration, and long-term planning. And once you compare how astronauts actually live and work inside it, the gap between old and new becomes much more revealing. So let's take a closer look. And if you value clear, grounded space analysis without the noise, this is the kind of channel worth following. At the moment, 2 human space stations are operating in low Earth orbit. One is the International Space Station, commonly known as the ISS. The other is China's Tiangong Space Station. Both orbit Earth at roughly 400 kilometers above the surface, completing a full orbit about every 90 minutes. The ISS is the older of the two. Its assembly began in 1998 and continued for more than a decade, eventually forming a structure weighing about 420 metric tons. It was built through cooperation between the United States, Russia, Europe, Japan, and Canada, and it remains the largest structure ever constructed in space. The station normally hosts 6 astronauts and has supported continuous human presence in orbit since the year 2000. Tiangong, by contrast, is a much newer system. China began assembling the station in 2021 with the launch of the Tianhe core module. Over the following year, 2 laboratory modules, Wentian and Mengtian, were added to complete the current configuration. The finished station forms a compact T-shaped structure with a total mass of about 77 tons. Despite being only about 1/3 the size of the ISS, Tiangong is designed to support long-duration missions with crews of 3 astronauts. And because the station was designed decades after the ISS, many of its systems reflect more recent engineering approaches. To understand how these 2 stations really differ, it helps to look at the systems that keep them operating in orbit. A space station is not simply a building floating in space. It is a complex machine that must constantly control its orientation, generate power, support human life, and perform scientific work while moving around Earth at nearly 28,000 kilometers per hour. One of the first challenges is maintaining the station's orientation in space. Engineers call this attitude control, which simply means controlling the direction the station is facing. On the International Space Station, this job is handled by 2 main systems: chemical thrusters and devices called control moment gyroscopes, or CMGs. A control moment gyroscope is essentially a large spinning wheel mounted inside the station. By changing the direction of that spinning wheel, the station can slowly rotate without using fuel. This is important because fuel in space is extremely limited and must be delivered by cargo spacecraft from Earth. The ISS uses 4 of these gyroscopes. 3 are required for normal operation, while the 4th acts as a backup in case one fails. However, gyroscopes cannot solve every problem. Over time, they can reach a state called saturation, where they can no longer counteract external forces. When that happens, the station must fire its chemical thrusters to reset the system and restore control. These thrusters are also used to adjust the station's orbit or to avoid space debris. China's Tiangong station also uses traditional chemical thrusters, with about 26 installed across the station. But Tiangong includes an additional technology that is rarely used on large crewed stations: Hall effect electric thrusters. A Hall effect thruster works very differently from a chemical rocket. Instead of burning fuel to create hot gas, it uses electricity to ionize a gas, usually xenon, and then accelerates those charged particles using electromagnetic fields. The ions are expelled at extremely high speeds, producing thrust. The force produced is relatively small, but the system is extremely efficient. This means Tiangong can maintain its orbit using far less propellant over time. Some estimates suggest that electric propulsion could save hundreds of kilograms of fuel each year. In practical terms, that means fewer resupply missions and lower logistical demands. Power generation is another essential system for any space station. Both the ISS and Tiangong rely on solar arrays, which are panels that convert sunlight directly into electricity using photovoltaic cells. The ISS uses some of the largest solar arrays ever deployed in space. Each set of arrays extends outward like large wings from the station's structure. When fully extended, these arrays can generate between roughly 84 and 120 kilowatts of electricity. That is enough power to run life support systems, scientific instruments, computers, and communications equipment. However, generating that much electricity also produces heat. In space, there is no air to carry heat away, so the station relies on large radiator panels. These radiators release heat into the cold vacuum of space, preventing sensitive systems from overheating. Tiangong approaches solar power slightly differently. Instead of a few massive arrays, each module carries its own steerable solar panels. These panels can rotate to continuously face the sun, improving efficiency throughout each orbit. They also use gallium arsenide photovoltaic cells, which are commonly used in high-efficiency space solar panels. Both stations store excess energy in batteries, so power remains available when the station passes into Earth's shadow. During each 90-minute orbit, a station spends about 35 minutes in darkness, so energy storage is essential. Another important system on any space station is robotics. Because astronauts cannot easily reach every part of a station during spacewalks, robotic arms are often used for assembly, maintenance, and capturing incoming spacecraft. The ISS uses a well-known robotic system called Canadarm2. This robotic arm is about 17 meters long and has been used for many tasks, including moving equipment, positioning astronauts during spacewalks, and capturing cargo vehicles arriving at the station. Tiangong uses a slightly different concept. Its main robotic arm is about 10 meters long and can move itself between attachment points on the outside of the station. This allows it to crawl across the station's exterior, giving it access to many areas without needing to remain fixed in one location. There is also a second robotic arm mounted on one of the laboratory modules. The two arms can operate independently or work together for more complex operations. This arrangement provides redundancy. If one arm experiences a problem, the other can still perform essential tasks. Automation also plays a larger role on Tiangong. Some onboard systems are designed to operate with greater autonomy, reducing the need for constant instructions from ground control. This approach could become increasingly important for future missions where communication delays make real-time control more difficult. Beyond engineering systems, living conditions inside the station also matter. Astronauts typically spend months in orbit, so the station must provide space for sleeping, working, eating, and exercising. The Tianhe Core module contains 3 sleeping quarters, a bathroom, and work areas. When combined with the laboratory modules, the station provides about 110 cubic meters of habitable space. That is smaller than the ISS, but still sufficient for long-duration missions with 3 astronauts. Daily life also includes exercise equipment, since microgravity causes muscle loss and reduced bone density over time. Astronauts usually exercise for about 2 hours each day to maintain physical health. Tiangong also includes features intended to improve comfort, such as a dynamic lighting system that simulates Earth's day-night cycle. Because astronauts experience up to 16 sunrises and sunsets each day in orbit, artificial lighting helps maintain a normal sleep rhythm. At first glance, The differences between the ISS and Tiangong might seem like simple engineering choices. One station is larger and older, while the other is newer and more compact. But when these systems are viewed in context, they begin to reveal something more important about how space infrastructure is evolving. The International Space Station was designed during the 1980s and 1990s, long before many modern technologies were widely available. Its architecture reflects that era. Many of its modules were built by different countries, launched on different rockets, and assembled gradually in orbit over many years. As a result, the station is incredibly capable, but it is also complex to maintain and expensive to operate. Tiangong, on the other hand, was designed decades later and built as a single national project. That allowed engineers to design the station as a more integrated system from the beginning. Systems such as electric propulsion, modular solar arrays, and greater onboard automation reflect technological developments that have matured over the past 20 years. If this approach proves effective over time, it could influence how future space stations are designed. Instead of very large structures assembled piece by piece, some agencies may favor smaller, modular stations that rely more heavily on efficient propulsion, automation, and flexible robotic systems. Another factor shaping this discussion is timing. The International Space Station is expected to reach the end of its operational life around the year 2030. Maintaining such a large and aging structure is becoming increasingly expensive, and several of its components date back to technology developed during the late Cold War era. If Tiangong continues operating successfully during this period, it may remain one of the few government-operated space stations in low Earth orbit. That would give China a continuous human presence in orbit at a time when other partners are transitioning toward new systems. However, that transition is already underway. NASA and its partners are preparing for a new generation of commercial space stations. Under this model, private companies would build and operate orbital platforms, while agencies like NASA would purchase services, such as astronaut missions and research time, rather than owning the station itself. If those commercial stations become operational before or shortly after the ISS is retired, low Earth orbit could shift toward a much more diverse ecosystem of stations. Some may be operated commercially, others nationally, and some through international partnerships. In that environment, Tiangong represents one possible model of how human space habitats might be built and operated in the future, and its design choices, especially in propulsion, automation, and modular construction, could influence how the next generation of orbital infrastructure is developed. Even though Tiangong is now fully operational, many aspects of its long-term development are still unfolding. The station currently consists of 3 primary modules: Tianhe, Wentian, and Mengtian. But China has indicated that the platform could expand in the future. Plans have been discussed for adding additional modules, which would increase the station's scientific capacity and potentially allow more astronauts to work on board. Another major development expected in the coming years is the Chinese Space Station Telescope, often referred to as CSST. Unlike most space telescopes, this observatory is designed to operate in the same orbital neighborhood as the Tiangong station. The telescope would normally fly independently, but it would also have the ability to dock with the station for maintenance or upgrades. If this concept works as intended, it could extend the operational life of the telescope and allow astronauts to repair or improve it directly in orbit. That capability was once demonstrated with the Hubble Space Telescope through astronaut servicing missions, but it has not been common for more recent observatories. At the same time, the broader environment in low Earth orbit is entering a period of transition. The International Space Station is currently scheduled to be deorbited around 2030, after more than 3 decades of development and nearly 25 years of continuous human presence in orbit. What replaces it will likely depend on the success of several commercial space station projects currently under development. If those new platforms become operational, the orbital environment around Earth could include multiple stations operated by different organizations and countries. If delays occur, however, the number of active stations could temporarily decline. For now, Tiangong represents one of the newest pieces of infrastructure in orbit. Its performance over the coming years, along with the development of new stations and telescopes nearby, will help shape the next phase of human activity in low Earth orbit. And as these systems continue to evolve, there will be many more developments worth watching closely in the years ahead.